Bernie Sanders had a sit-down interview with John Harwood at CNBC, and they talked about a number of things, including the label of democratic socialism, which some people love to fearmonger about. Let's take a look at what that exchange looked like.
So you identify as a democratic socialist. You got the endorsement of Representative Ocasio-Cortez over the weekend, another prominent democratic socialist. How far do you think you can take the United States of America toward democratic socialism?
Well, it depends, what we mean by democratic socialism. He said Bernie Sanders is an existential threat to the Democratic Party. I agree with him. I am. I want to convert the Democratic Party to break its dependency on big money and corporate interests, like Third Way, and make it into a party of working class people, of young people, of all people who believe in justice.
One of the big things the president has is the appointment power, apart from legislation you can get done. Would it be your intention to appoint democratic socialists to big positions in your administration?
You're going a little bit too crazy on the word here. I will appoint people who believe in the working class and the working families of this country, who are prepared to stand up to the incredibly powerful corporate interests that today dominate our economic and political life.
So look, I think that no one cares to look into actual policy, which drives me crazy. And if you look at Bernie Sanders' policies, for the vast majority of things that he's proposed, with maybe the exception of Medicare for All, they're things that Americans had before. Free public college is something that Americans used to have until tax cuts for the wealthy took priority over creating opportunity and providing education for the American people, right? So if you really look at his policies, Bernie Sanders is more of a social democrat than a democratic socialist, or at least his policies and the Scandinavian model that he's pushing for is a social democratic model. So I think that's important to mention. One other thing, just for context, remember CNBC is the same news organization that put out a story about how millennials are saving too much money, and that's hurting the economy. And then they put out stories about how millennials aren't able to afford homes because they're spending too much money. Like, it's just the type of news organization that puts out all sorts of problematic crony capitalism nonsense that, of course they're gonna fearmonger about someone like Bernie Sanders.
So now the big story that came out of that interview is of course all wrong. I'll tell you what I think the big story is. But the story is that Sanders says you're going crazy with that word. And the person who wrote it says, oh, there was only 2 questions. Well, you saw it on the tape, he said it 4 times. And AOC is a democratic socialist, a democratic socialist, democratic socialist. Now, why is he doing that? He's doing that on purpose. Like, one question about it, I get it, it's an issue in the race and you can't be overly sensitive about that. In fact, I would welcome that question and I'd answer it super aggressively. And I would argue that Bernie in a lot of ways answered it super aggressively. I think that's a real story that I'm gonna get back to in a second. But by the time that you've mentioned it the 4th time, it appears you have an agenda. And the agenda is to tell, not to interview the guy, but to tell your audience, remember this guy, democratic socialist. Hey, all the corporate people watching CNBC and all the older people who don't like democratic socialism, democratic socialist over here, right? So keep it real, keep it real. And so in terms of the wordplay, it drives me nuts. None of these labels mean a goddamn thing.
Right.
And I know people on the left also think that the labels mean a lot. And are you a socialist or democratic, blah, 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 whatever. No, look, I call myself a capitalist. Does it mean anything? It doesn't mean a goddamn thing. I agree almost completely with Bernie Sanders' proposals. So, because what's socialism? Like Pete Buttigieg says, I just want people to have choices in healthcare because I'm a capitalist. Okay, yeah. You could fill in, as one of our viewers pointed out the other day. I just want people to have choices in the fire departments, and that's why I'm a capitalist. Wait, no, choices in fire departments, choices in cops, choices in military is not a thing. It doesn't make sense. It's the same in healthcare. So it's all a matter of what we keep public and what we make private. Sneakers should be done by private companies, but things like utilities should be public. So if you say that a utility should be public, you're not a socialist, right? You're also It doesn't matter if you call yourself a socialist or capitalist. The only thing that matters is what's public and what's private, and you can judge that in the policies. But we don't have conversations like that. Instead, we have these nonsense horse race type of conversations with like, what do you call yourself? Oh yeah, you're socialist can't win. Democratic socialist can't win. Ha ha ha. Well, did you ask about any of the substance? Like, to be fair, it's a longer interview and there were substantive questions, but the focus on that, the over focus on that is maddening.
It is maddening. And look, the thing that also is maddening is, of course, there's gonna be all sorts of fear mongering about socialism. The word Marxist has this negative connotation, but in reality, socialism is a framework. It's all in how it's carried out, right? And so no one is arguing that the government is gonna own the means of production, even in a case where you have everything made public. Right? There are ways to carry out socialism where the means of production are actually owned by the workers, right?
So
yeah, go ahead.
Flip it, guys, flip it, right? So if I'm Bernie Sanders in that situation, look, and his answer is great. I gotta get to that in a second. But you say, hey, you know what socialism, Social Security, it's kind of in the title, and Medicare. Now, are you against socialism like that? John Harwood or Pete Buttigieg or Donald Trump, do you want to take away Social Security and Medicare? Because I just heard you said you were against socialism. That is indisputably socialist. That is the government collecting money for your retirement for you through taxes. It is not at all private, right? So there's no question it's socialist. Are you trying to take that away? Are you trying to take socialism away from the American people? These guys are against Social Security and Medicare, okay? Now, you could do that and that would be super strong. But Bernie was super strong. The real story out of that interview is the answer he gave. He said, yes, I am an existential threat to the Democratic Party. That's an awesome, strong answer. Yes. That's saying I'm not playing around here. This is not around the edges. We're not going for pocket change. We're going for a full-blown takeover of the Democratic Party, and we're going to take out the corporate money and we're going to serve the people. That is the best case that Bernie Sanders has. And he was often, in my opinion, too reluctant to make that case forcefully. Here he is making it. And by the way, if you want to fearmonger, have at it, corporate media. Tell everybody he's an existential threat to the Democratic Party. But you're afraid that that would actually help his cause. But I will, because I'm fair, I'll criticize Bernie too, okay? Air quotes are not done with 3 fingers. Okay, he keeps doing this.
I love it, I don't care, I love it.
I'm obviously kidding about that critique. Although I do mean it, it's with 2 fingers. It's not a real critique of a politician. Anyway, look, by the way, speaking of too soft or too strong, we asked you guys yesterday, are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren too soft on Joe Biden? And we gave a real answer for no, like no, you want to make sure that you maintain the ability to beat Donald Trump in a general election, etc. You guys weren't having it. 95% of you, over 1,000 people voted. You can keep on voting at tyt.com/Biden. 95% of you said that Bernie and Warren are too soft on Joe Biden. So that is a progressive audience saying that the progressive candidates should be much harsher and make their case. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.